Today, I'm going to break down the 3 things that make Drake's beats so emotional and how you can replicate them in your own music. The first thing that is essential to getting this Drake R&B emotional kind of sound is having emotional and moody chords like this. So those sound nice and emotional, but instead of just showing you what they sound like, let's break down how you can actually make a pattern like this. Some great go-to chords to start using are major 7ths and minor 7ths. And I know that these can sound intimidating, but I promise they're really not. All it is a 4-note chord where you just extend the chord to one more level after the basic major and minor triads. So let's break that down. All right, so if I'm gonna delete this pattern right here and make it from scratch, the first note we start with is this D, and then to make a minor chord, you just skip 2 spaces, skip 3 spaces. So we get that, but that doesn't sound very R&B, very soulful. All you need to do to extend it is go over here and make sure your key lock is on the key that you want to be in, and then just skip a note. Boom. Now you have a 4-note chord right there. So what I'm going to do now is take that chord, put it up 2. And then I'm gonna make a major 7th. So this is 3 spaces instead of 2 spaces. 2 spaces again, 3 spaces. And then you have the basis of this chord progression right here. But there's another thing that is really common in these Drake songs that gives it some more emotion and more of that R&B vibe. So what I'm gonna do is copy this over, and then for the second half, I'm gonna change the chords just a little bit. So instead of doing this major 7th right here, I'm gonna go up to this minor chord and extend this. So now we have that 2, 3, 2 that I was talking about earlier. But I'm gonna take this note, put it down 1, and then put this note down an octave as well. And what this is it's called inverting your chords, or different voicings of your chords. And this gives it a different feeling, but it's playing those same notes. And it's something that you can play around with super easily just to create some more variation in your patterns. Let's say for the second section of this MIDI, I just take the middle notes of all the chords and then put them up an octave, and then you have a whole different sound that is still in the same chord progression, so it'll work with all the other ideas that you have going on top of it. Now, just to give this a little bit more feeling, I'm going to copy the root notes of the chords and then just put them down an octave, and then you get this chord progression. Then I could even hear this changing like that. That's a much more emotional, and it doesn't sound so basic. Now that you've got a smooth and emotional chord progression down, one of the key elements to these Drake R&B kind of records is the way that all of the sounds sound. These records have a super mellow, laid back, and kind of filtered sound, and there's 2 ways that you can achieve that. One, you want to have the right sound selection. So for chords, you want to use instruments like electric pianos, acoustic pianos, and pads. Then you want to have some kind of synth bass sound and some vocals, which we'll get into later. And then the other thing you're going to want to do to achieve this Drake underwater kind of sound is mess with the effects. And to show you how big of a difference those effects can make, let's hear the piano we just made before and after effects. And you might be thinking, well, that's pretty obvious. You just grab the EQ and cut out all the high end, but that's not how you get the most authentic kind of Drake sound. 40 said in an interview that he actually downsamples the melodies so that the high end frequencies don't even exist. So he's not just cutting them off, they don't exist in the melody. So to do something similar, I grabbed this Decimort plugin right here, and as you can see, I cut off all the frequencies that are above around 2300 hertz. And let me just play with this effect just to show you what I mean. You can see that sounds super filtered now. One key thing I want to point out with this plugin though is make sure that you have this button clicked, because if you don't, this is what it'll sound like. Now that we have the piano sounding good, I just duplicated that over onto a synth pad that I talked about before. And then for the processing, I grabbed that Decimort plugin again and filtered it off a little bit because you don't want too much high end going. And then I added this Shaper Box plugin, and what this does is it gives the pad kind of a pulsing sound, and it almost makes it sound kind of chopped and sampled, which is exactly what we want for these kind of melodies. And then to fill it out, you want to just find a simple synth bass and then copy the root notes that you had on your chords or something like this. Once you've got the chords and a matching bass line down, you really don't need to worry about adding a ton of melodies on top of that, because the last and to me the most important part of these Drake R&B records are the crazy emotional vocals inside the samples. And to get vocals for these samples, you can obviously go to websites like Splice or even Sonics to get some crazy vocal samples. But if you want to experiment with making your own, which I personally highly recommend, because you can get custom stuff exactly for that piece of music and it just makes it sound a lot better and not so recycled. You can do it without having a great singing voice. So let me show you this idea that I wrote on top of these chords and kind of break down how you can do something similar. All right, so with no effects, my vocals sound like this, and be prepared, they're not the best. You're breaking my heart with all that you've done. On these silent nights, I'm alone. So as you can tell, definitely not the best, but I'm going to show you how you can finesse vocals like that to make them sound good. Obviously, the first thing you're going to want to do is auto-tune, so I just put it in the key that I'm in. You're breaking my heart with all that you've done. For the auto-tune settings, you want to have your retune speed not too fast, because you don't want that Travis Scott sound for these kind of vocals. You want it to be around like 30-ish. You want to turn this flex tune up and this humanize, and what this is going to do is it's going to let your voice be a little bit out of key, and it's just going to make it sound a lot more smoother and more human, not so robotic. Then you're going to want to add an EQ, just get rid of the ugly frequencies. Now for this next part, this is something that I don't see many people talking about with their vocals. If you can't sing and you're off key all the time, what you're going to want to do if you're in Logic is go to this flex button right here and then choose the flex pitch mode. You can see that I'm way off key right here. Like this is playing in the middle of two notes. So what I'm going to do right here is boom, set to perfect pitch. Now everything is directly on the grid where it should be. It just puts your vocal on the pitch that you want it without giving that auto-tune kind of effect. And then you're going to want to add some reverb. Reverb is definitely going to help your vocals. You're breaking my heart with all that you've done. Now to take it one step further to get that authentic Drake sound and secretly hide the fact that you can't sing, you're going to want to filter this and add a ton of reverb. And my favorite preset to do this with is this magnitude transition preset in RC20. It's got this EQ right here and it's got this filter, and this is what the vocals sound like with that. You're breaking my heart with all that you've done. And then one last thing you can do to kind of mask your own voice if you hate it like I do is you can pitch the whole thing down. So I'm going to pitch this down 3. And instantly, this sounds a lot better. So you don't need some crazy vocal chain to hide the fact that you can't sing. Just filter it a bit, add some reverb, and correct the pitch with auto-tune and Melodyne or flex pitch if you're in Logic, and you can get some decent sounding vocals. I love to take it to that next level, so I hired a vocalist to re-sing this idea that I had. So I got those vocals back and I pitched the pad in the piano down 6 notes, and then I pitched the vocals up 6 notes. And what this does is it creates space between the vocal and the music, because now they're playing in 2 completely different octaves, and pitching the chords down will also leave a ton of high frequencies for an artist's vocals on top. If you like the loop that I've been making, I just dropped a crazy R&B loop kit with this one and over 50 other melodies. Check some of them out with me. Oof, this one's crazy. Love this one too. Will you hold me down? Will you hold me down? This kit is also going to come with an in-depth, uncut tutorial on how I process these R&B loops to sound like they're real samples and sound like real Drake records. So if you like R&B loops and that interests you, check out the first link in the description down below. Now, even though I said 3, there's one more component to these emotional Drake beats that makes them so good, and that is simple drums. And you'll end up with something like this. If you want to learn the secrets to J. Cole's soulful production, click this video right here.